Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June 14th, 2021 Troy City Council meeting. Please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. As today is Flag Day, I have a prayer regarding Flag Day. God, early founders of the nation on this day in 1777 adopted a flag to symbolize their solidarity in defense and in belief of a new type of republic. They selected stars and stripes to speak both of colonial individuality as state rights draw upon a broader field of federal identity. Lord, our pledge as a people means even more in today's world on this Flag Day. Fill us with promising hope and peaceful unity as we stare at the starry sky. Enable us to reach out further and further in the broad bands of freedom and compassion to fellow citizens of this world most in need. Lord, may this flag before which we stand be a mirror of this people and a sign of promise to others that equal justice under governing law assures progressive victory over egoism and evil, both in times of prosperity and adversity, in times of war and peace. In our allegiance, we witness to one nation under God as a promise of what others in this world can yet become. For this, we Americans stand together today, proud and strong, both now and forever. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Officially call this meeting to order and ask Ms. Dixon for the roll call.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks?
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga?
Here.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
All present. First up on the agenda this evening is certificates of recognition and special presentations. We have two of them this evening. C1 is a proclamation in recognition and appreciation of the Troy Garden Club on their 50th anniversary. We've got four visitors here this evening. Judy Cornelier, who's their longest-serving member, Linda Forrester, who's the president, Carol Carter, who's a longtime member, and Barb Lepre, who's the past president. If you join me down at the podium, I'll present the proclamation to you. Oh. Have you come on this side, you're blocked. It's a better angle. So go ahead and come through. Didn't think this through.
Thank you.
Come on over.
Are you going back up there?
I will.
Would you pass on the piece?
I sure will.
Thank you.
When I go back.
When you go back.
Welcome back.
Oh, and face this way?
Face this way. I know. They can see you every which way, but yeah, it's better this way. So I'm going to read this proclamation into the record,
Please
if you'd
do.
oblige me, and then I'll give you an opportunity to say, yeah. Let's
Thank
spread
you,
out.
Mayor.
It's even better. All right.
That's a nice one.
So this is a proclamation in recognition and appreciation of the Troy Garden Club on their 50th anniversary. Whereas the Troy Garden Club was established in 1971 to provide an opportunity for members to learn better horticulture practices, promote civic beauty, and conserve natural resources. And whereas the Troy Garden Club was open to people interested in gardening and those wanting to share their knowledge and experience with others, the club has grown from a modest start with 34 members meeting in each other's homes to over 100 members in 2021. And whereas early projects also included an annual flower show and annual garden walks beginning in 1974. Their annual garden walk proceeds are used to make horticultural-based donations to local and state nonprofits, as well as scholarships to students of horticulture. And whereas since 1973, the Troy Garden Club members have given back to their community by beautifying the gardens at many city facilities, including here at City Hall, the Troy Public Library, and the Troy Historic Village. The Historic Village's first herb garden was planted in 1974 next to the Caswell House. And whereas the Troy Garden Club members have volunteered as hostesses serving refreshments at the annual Troy Historic Village's Christmas event each December since the 1980s, and have also decorated the entire village for this event since the 1990s. And whereas Troy Garden Club members planted the ABC Garden, the Gazebo Garden, and moved the herb garden next to the log cabin at the Historic Village. In 2011, they decided to take over all the garden beds at the village and transformed it into 2013 to be one of their sites for their annual garden walk. And whereas over the years, the Troy Garden Club also donated funds to seed the village lawn and provided landscaping plants around the Niles Barnard House and invaluable pro bono consulting services regarding historically appropriate plants for many historic village programs. And whereas the Troy Garden Club members have planted evergreens, petunias, marigolds, daffodil bulbs, purple mountain grass, and purple leaf canna in the spring in front of the Troy Public Library, transforming the entranceway into a breathtaking and delightful sight for visitors. And whereas the Troy Garden Club was honored in October 2019 with an award from Keep Michigan Beautiful, Inc., a nonprofit state organization dedicated to promoting beautification, garden cleanup projects, combating litter, a cool reverb echo, if you heard that, and recycling. The KMB Award recognized the efforts of the club for their work at the Troy Public Library and the Troy Historic Village. Now, therefore, be it known that the City Council of the City of Troy takes this opportunity to express its appreciation to the Troy Garden Club for their hard work and dedication in beautifying the Troy community, and be it further known that the Troy City Council, city management, and the citizens of the City of Troy congratulate the Troy Garden Club on their 50th anniversary and commend the Troy Garden Club for its tradition of promoting civic beauty and extend sincere thanks to all the members for their distinguished service. It's presented this 14th day of June 2021, signed by myself as mayor, and all members of City Council have also signed it. So we present, who wants to hold it? Should I give it to you? I'll present it to you.
Yes.
And I
Thank
say
you.
congratulations. Of
Yes.
course, and
Now
I
it's
think
fine.
Cindy wants to take a picture, but let's come to the side. Well, let's come over this way. We're getting back to the swing race here.
I always feel like I don't want to be on the wall.
You want to say a few words?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here this evening. As an original member of the Troy Garden Club, let me share with this what this club has done for our members and for me, and I will be brief. We represent also a national organization called the Women's National Farm and Garden Association, a group of women who were instrumental in helping us to develop into what we are today. Yes, it has been 50 years from our beginning. Shh, 50 years for me too. Gardening has filled my life here in Troy. It was through my participation in this club that learning about gardening started with informed speakers, followed by projects in gardening to share how to garden. Friendships grew, and we were off to a good start. Very soon, I found myself teaching, as I had come from a family who grew their own food. 4-H was another organization to learn from, and I raised sheep for competition. Soon, teaching arts and crafts and gardening classes filled in more time in Troy adult education for 25 years. This led to speaking on gardening topics at gardening clubs in the Tri-County area and beyond. 10 years of Telly's Garden House and Greenhouse and Garden Center has given me a wonderful life in Troy. Let me share some of the things that were mentioned, but I want to make a special note about 3 of them. The Troy Public Library has been a treasure for us. We plant and go back to weed, and when we do, the patrons passing, the person in charge of the library and the people in there come out to say how pretty it is, how they are appreciative of what we are doing, and we chat about all sorts of gardening things. The next is the historical village. Starting that herb garden years ago was just a beginning, and now it's been there for years. And the school bus children come in droves and walk through our garden, touch the herbs, smell them, learn about the history of herbs throughout Troy for the use and delight of the pioneers that went before us. Also at the museum, taking over the gardens, it has done wonders. Again, it is our chance as members of the Garden Club to teach the new members coming in about gardening, how to do it, how to make it work for them. Let's see. The last place I wish to mention is Troy Lloyd Stage Nature Center. We give money and time to the Nature Center. And again, busloads of children are coming there and learning about our environment, learning to care for what is there and what is there to go home and learn and take care of our world as they find it. Before the deer, we did gardening. Shh. No more. But if the deer should reduce, anyways. This year is our 46th garden walk coming up July 14th, 2001. The title is Anniversary Gardens. We are glad to be able to hold it again as we missed it last year. This is our major fundraiser. We have had up to 1,000 people tour gardens. It is down because of you know what, but we are hoping for the best to rebuild again. It is from that we use our money to make donations to wonderful things outside our immediate community. And some of them are like the Big Beaver United Methodist Church where we meet, and the Detroit Garden Center, Glena's Community Food Center, horticultural scholarships. Those children take our money and go on to study horticulture and carry it back to our community is what we hope. There are many, many more, and I believe in your packet you have a list of them. We are proud of our donations and proud of our garden walk. This garden walk this year will be 6 gardens locally, and you should be able to come and walk through them and see what people are doing in Troy and surrounding communities in their gardens to make their homes beautiful. It is a fun, again, learning exploration, but also a chance to view beautiful gardens and flowers. One year, out front were 2 squares, and that's where we started planting flowers. A group of us were out there early, weeding and digging and preparing the soil, planting petunias, and having a wonderful time in the sun. And a gentleman came out and presented us a note. The note was from Frank Gerstenecker, our first city manager. He was sitting in his office watching outside in the sun, working in the soil and planting. How he wished that he could be out doing that with us. That has been our experience through the years. The city of Troy has welcomed us and supported us, and we thank you generously for that. We are very pleased to be invited here and to accept the recognition of years of service to our city of Troy. Let me end with, I and the members of the Troy Garden Club are proud to live and work and participate in the city of Troy. Thank you.
We can't overstate the importance of beautification in our city and what the Troy Garden Club does for us. I know we've got some big fans of that kind of work in our community, and we know what you do for us, and it makes a huge difference. People don't realize the value of that, but we do, so thank you.
Thank you.
And the garden walk's Suzanne, if you haven't been to one of the garden walks, make sure you go this year. It's right up your alley. Yeah, it's right up your alley. All right, very good. Thank you very much. 50 years is wonderful. So I'm glad to have you back here. Is there anybody, Cindy, did anybody arrive for the proclamation for the Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month? Anybody here for that? All right, well, I'm going to go back up to the desk and hand that. All right, C2 is the proclamation for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month, June 2021, and I will read it into the record because I think it's very important. Whereas post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, affects people of all ages and can occur after a person experiences trauma, including, but not limited to, the stress of combat, rape, sexual assault, child abuse, bombings, accidents, and natural disasters, and affects approximately 8 million people in the United States annually. And whereas PTSD is associated with chemical changes in the body's hormonal system and autonomic nervous system, and is characterized by symptoms including flashbacks, nightmares, insomnia, avoidance, hypervigilance, anxiety, and depression. And whereas the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces who proudly serve the nation and risk their lives to protect our freedom deserve the investment of every possible resource to ensure their lasting physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And whereas combat-related PTSD stress among our men and women in the armed forces is significantly pronounced, given that they are often exposed to highly traumatic events for weeks, months, and even years. And whereas between 10 and 30% of service members will develop PTSD within a year of leaving combat, while others may not develop symptoms until years later. And whereas, despite its treatability, many cases of PTSD remain undiagnosed and untreated due to a lack of awareness of this condition and the persistent stigma associated with mental health conditions. And whereas raising awareness of this condition is necessary to remove the stigma and to encourage those suffering to seek proper and timely treatment that may save their lives, it is up to each of us to know that the PTSD assessment form is a major tool to seek medical assistance. And whereas all citizens suffering from PTSD deserve our consideration, and those who are affected by PTSD from wounds received while protecting our freedom deserve our respect and special honor. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City Council of the City of Troy recognizes June 2021 as Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Month to bring awareness to those with PTSD and to encourage people to reach out to their fellow citizens to provide support and remove the stigma associated with this disorder. And be it further resolved that we call upon our citizens, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools to recommit our state to increasing awareness and understanding of post-traumatic stress disorder and the need for appropriate and accessible services for all people with PTSD to promote recovery. This is presented this 14th day of June 2021. That concludes certificates of recognition and special presentations. There are no carryover items this evening, so we move on to public hearings. We have 2 of them. First up is E1. It's a conditional rezoning, CRJPLN 2019-001, proposed MNK Troy 1 LLC, east side of Rochester Road, south of Shallowdale, parcel number 88-20-14-152-001, and number 88-20-14-301-031, Section 14, from R1C, one-family residential, RT, one-family attached residential, and EP, environmental protection districts, to RT, one-family attached residential district. And Community Development Director Brent Savedon is up here this evening with no plexiglass. Should be a little easier. Go ahead, Brent.
Good evening, Mayor Baker, City Council. It's very refreshing having the plastic gone because my reflection was right about here. Yeah. So all I was seeing was myself when I was making the presentation, and that's a scary sight. Just waiting for the PowerPoint to come up.
Yeah, give me 1 second. It is
Could you also dim the lights? I think it would help people see the slideshow. Just along the back wall. That's helpful. Thanks, Bob. So, prior to the meeting, City Manager Miller recognized that we haven't presented many projects before the City Council in the last 16 months. So he suggested that for both items this evening, we add a small educational component, not only for City Council, but those attending live or remotely. So I'll start with, this is a conditional rezoning, and the first question that some may have is, what exactly is a zoning ordinance? A zoning ordinance is a law, and it's our regulation of land use and development in the City of Troy. and it implements our master plan, which is our policy. The master plan is a policy document. We implement it through law, which is our zoning ordinance. And our zoning ordinance is comprised of about 350 pages of text and one map. And when you amend the text, it's called the zoning ordinance text amendment. And when you amend the map, it's a zoning ordinance map amendment, also known as a rezoning. It's initiated, for the most part, it's initiated by an application and a fee from a developer who wants to develop property. It can also be initiated by the Planning Commission or by City Council. That's more rare that happens. But in terms of process, it's required by state law that the Planning Commission has a public hearing, makes a finding or a recommendation on the application, and then it goes before City Council. Like all legislative decisions, like involving laws, like other ordinances and bylaws, City Council has final authority. So that's why we're here this evening. It's gone before Planning Commission, and here we are for the final word by City Council. In terms of the conditional rezoning, it adds another layer. This is something that I think a lot of City Council has probably heard, but I don't think we've dealt with one of these in a number of years. So what is a conditional rezoning? It is a zoning ordinance map amendment, but it involves the applicant voluntarily, and I underline it and put it in yellow. It's very important. It's not a negotiation. It involves the applicant voluntarily offering conditions of approval as a condition of approval in order to protect adjacent properties from the potential impacts of the development. And some of the conditions that could be voluntarily offered include use restriction, height restriction, density, hours of operation, things like that. Give you an example. But potentially there's a property that a developer wants to rezone to commercial. And there's one neighbor behind the development, and the neighbor says, I don't care what you rezone this to. I have no problem with anything permitted under the zoning ordinance if you rezone commercial. I just don't want a drive-through. I'm going to be really opposed to a drive-through. The developer could say, I'll tell you what, I'll voluntarily restrict my development rights and will voluntarily agree not to put in a drive-through, as an example. Another example is the item that's before us this evening. The developer wants to rezone to RT, one family attached residential. When it was first submitted, you've all looked at the packet. When it was first submitted, he had he voluntarily offered some conditions, but they weren't really fleshed out yet. And a lot of the residents had significant issues with the application. The developer took time, literally sat in all the abutting neighbors, reached out to them all, sat in some of their kitchens to talk about it, listened, and voluntarily offered a list of conditions to calm the owners down and basically put together an application that made more sense for everybody. Why? It eliminates the open-endedness of traditional rezonings. It adds predictability because the developer, if they're paying attention, will talk to the neighbors or at the very least think about the potential impacts and voluntarily offer conditions to mitigate those impacts. During the process, the residents have an opportunity to voice their concerns, and the goal here is a win-win. Balance of property rights. I always talk about that concept. Balance of property rights, and this is a tool that we use. So in terms of background, the property is located on the east side of Rochester Road, not west side. It's 3.77 acres in area. They're proposing to rezone from a combination of RT, R1C, and EP to RT. Presently, the zoning. It's what we call split zoning. It's two properties, but it's got three zoning classifications. The RT is here, this moon-shaped piece. R1C, one family residential to the north, and EP, environmental protection, to the east. The applicant is proposing that the entire parcel be rezoned to RT, one family residential, which will afford the developer the rights to construct a attached condominium on this property. So here's a list of the conditions offered, and I think it's important just to go over these really briefly because a lot of time was spent between the developer and Planning Commission, and more importantly with the residents to kind of iron these out. The developer proposes 32 units total, not to exceed, in 8 buildings, each with a 2-car garage. He proposes durable, low-maintenance building materials, a minimum of 9 guest parking spaces, a dry detention basin. So the detention basin is located here. And one of the issues that some of the residents had to the east was geese. If it's a wet basin, it's an attractive nuisance for geese. So this is what we call a dry basin, where it's going to handle water for significant rain events, but that water is going to be dissipated, and it'll dry up eventually and relatively quickly. So it's less attractive for geese, which is, as we all know, it can be a maintenance problem. The applicant proposes additional screening along the 250 feet of the southern property line. There's going to be no exterior refuse containers. The residents didn't want to look at trash cans, or trash dumpsters, excuse me. They proposed 3 rows of coniferous trees on the east side of the detention basin, 2 rows on the north side. And there's a concept plan that generally illustrates these concepts. It's not a detailed site plan. They're going to have to go before Planning Commission in the future if this is approved. But it helps illustrate some of the concepts that we're talking about this evening. In terms of our rezoning considerations, we're looking at this rezoning application in 2 parts. We're first looking at, I feel like Lou Gehrig up here.
Can I interrupt for just 1 second? Is there an issue with technology that prohibits us from moving forward with a public hearing?
It doesn't prohibit us from moving forward. We're not being heard on Zoom right now, but I think most of the participants on Zoom are city staff.
Okay. So if we go ahead, Brent.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure.
Thank
so we
you.
didn't have to repeat anything later.
Thank you, Mayor Baker, for confirming that. We broke this down into the front portion of the site, which is essentially some of it's proposed to be rezoned from R1C to RT, and the rear portion, because the considerations are a little bit different. I'll get into it really briefly here. So let's look at the front portion. That portion that's R1C, one family residential, rezoning to RT. Go back in the time machine and we'll look at land use policy related to Rochester Road. July 13th, 1999, the master land use plan was amended, and the city added medium density residential along Rochester Road north of Wattles. So this is a policy that considers rezoning that parcel facing Rochester Road to attached residential. Fast forward 3 years to January 8th, 2002. The future land use plan was amended, and they retained that classification along Rochester Road of multifamily residential north of Wattles. We comprehensively updated the master plan in 2008. We established the Rochester Road land use classification. It's shown here in green, goes all the way up to South Boulevard. It talked about more intense development at the nodes, but along Rochester Road, away from the nodes, it contemplated multifamily residential along Rochester Road. So what does this mean? For over 20 years, we've had a policy that's contemplated rezoning some parcels along Rochester Road when appropriate to multifamily attached. And you see outlined in yellow a number of rezonings that have happened over the last 20 plus years. There's a scattering of them, but you see a pattern here. Now let's look at the rear portion, EP, environmental protection to RT. The EP district was established decades ago, and it was used for 2 purposes. One was to, obviously, environmental protection was to protect natural features, but a lot of times it was used as a land use buffer. And it was, in some cases, it was used as kind of a line in the sand. This is the limits of the rezoning. This is the limits of development between a dense district and a single family residential district, which is what we have here. In 2002, the RT you see here, this brown, which is over 12 acres, was rezoned to RT, and at the time this was rezoned to EP to serve as a buffer, because this portion here, Briggs Park, in 2006, this multifamily attached development was developed. And the applicant proposes to rezone that EP portion to RT, but they want to use most of that area for stormwater detention and a tree buffer. I mentioned they're talking about 3 rows of trees to the east, 2 rows of trees north of the detention basin, and they propose a dry detention basin, which the neighbors strongly push for. These were voluntarily offered. These basically calm down a lot of the concerns of the neighbors, and the neighbors support the rezoning to RT and eliminating EP because they're keeping the stormwater detention in the tree buffer. So that's one of the benefits of the conditional rezoning. Here we have a comparison of by right versus rezoning, and the major takeaway here is in terms of density. Today, the potential density on the parcels is 20 units, excuse me, and the potential yield is 32 units. Setbacks, height, and open space is comparable. So the question is, for the additional 12 units, initially the neighbors were very concerned, but through the conditional rezoning process, they're able to have some input, and the developer listened and put together some conditions to address those concerns. The standards of rezoning are in section 16.03C. I'm not going to go over these, but for anyone following at home, that's where they're located. And in terms of summary and recommendation, as I indicated, the site's been master planned for multifamily residential for more than 20 years. Rezoning the front portion from R1C to RT is consistent with the master plan. The applicant worked with the neighbors to ensure that the voluntarily offered conditions address neighborhood concerns. The buffer to the along the northern and eastern property lines are in addition to what's the minimum required by the ordinance. On January 28th, 2020, Planning Commission recommended approval by a vote of 8-0, and the Planning Department recommends approval, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Brent. Any questions from council? Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. And I'm really just in awe of the developers' outreach to the nearby residents to make them actually come out in support of this project. It's very unique, and I'm very happy to see that. I know that if this rezoning is approved, they will then have to create a site plan and eventually bring that to Planning Commission. Do you have any kind of loose ballpark timeline until they would break ground on this, until the project would be completed, or is it just too hard to say at this point since this is like the first step?
The applicant is here this evening. The applicant's civil engineer is here this evening. I can tell you they submitted the preliminary site plan application months and months ago, but we really can't process it until it's rezoned because attached single-family residential is not a permitted use in the R1C. So they're going to be very aggressive is what they've told me. They don't want to miss out on an entire building season. But in terms of timelines, potential timelines, I would defer to the applicant.
Okay. Thank you. Any other? Councilmember Chamberlain-Cranga.
Question. Yes. Thank you, Director Salvador. That was very informative to go through all of that. In terms of the size of these units, how do those compare with those at Briggs Park next door?
Well, you're catching me flat-footed with that question. They're going to the size of the units is going they're going to meet all requirements of the underlying zoning district. My guess is they're probably going to be comparable. Again, I would defer. I haven't processed the site plan yet because we can't. So otherwise, I would be able to tell you.
Sure, getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
Second question is, there's talk of that 24% open space kind of buffer. Is that the entire EP section? Is that, or is it also? I know there's this easement, open space easement potentially.
So in terms of buffering, the detention basin is here to the east, triple row of trees here, double row of trees here, additional spacing here, open space here, open space here, with additional landscaping along the south. There's minimum requirements for buffering. This significantly will surpass the requirements of the zoning ordinance.
And that constitutes that 24%?
Yes.
Open space buffer. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions from council? All right, let me open the public hearing. Oh, well. Someone should move the resolution. I'm forgetting my procedure suddenly.
You may wish to allow the applicant.
I'm sorry. Would the applicant like to speak this evening? Thank you. I knew I was forgetting something.
We're getting back into the groove.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor,
Good evening.
council members. John Thompson with PEA Group, representing MNK Troy 1 LLC this evening. I think Brent did a great job explaining the project. I also would like to thank the Planning Department, the DPW, the City Attorney's Office, as well as the neighborhood and the HOA for all their assistance in getting to this point. I can answer the questions with regards to size. We're looking at 1,400 to 1,700 square feet per unit, which is comparable to Briggs Park. And as far as the open space question goes, 24% is 0.93 acres, which is the same acreage as the existing EP, which we put under an open space agreement, and that area itself represents 24. There's additional locations that Brent pointed out that are open space that will further enhance the amount of total open space. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Councilmember Hamilton?
I was re-asked, what is your timeline for,
Sorry, we would, as Brent indicated, we have a site plan submittal, so we'll pursue to be on the earliest possible agenda for site plan, and then break straight into construction drawings and permits. We'd like to break ground this year if we can.
Wow, okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I will open the public hearing then. There's nobody that's signed up to speak through the system. Is anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this issue, on this matter? Not seeing anybody. City Clerk Dixon, is there anybody that has submitted emails, voicemails, or anybody on Zoom?
We do not have any emails or voicemails for this item. There are some people signed in as attendees. If you are signed in and you would like to speak on item E1, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. And nobody's raised their hand.
All right. We'll close the public hearing. Would someone like to move the E1 for the resolution? Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I will move E1, conditional rezoning, CR JPLN 2019-001, proposed MNK Troy 1 LLC, east side of Rochester Road, south of Shallowdale, parcel number 88-20-14-152-001, and number 88-20-14-301-031, section 14 from R1C, one family residential, RT, one family attached residential, and EP, environmental protection districts, to RT, one family attached residential district, as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain-Krienga, that we approve E1 conditional rezoning CRJPLN 2019-001, proposed MNK Troy 1 LLC, east side of Rochester Road, south of Shallowdale, parcel number 88-20-14-152-001, and number 88-20-14-301-031, section 14 from R1C, one family residential, RT, one family attached residential, and EP, environmental protection districts, to RT, one family attached residential district, as printed in the agenda packet. Discussion.
I would like to restate as printed in the late submittal.
Correct, in the late submittal. Discussion? Councilmember Hoderick?
I just wanted to take a second to thank the residents who clearly participated in helping this project move forward constructively. Development's going to happen, change is going to happen in Troy, and it takes all of us working together to manage that change, to be as collaborative and complementary to our existing, what's there existing. And to the developer for, I've had my share of kitchen table conversations and input, and there's nothing more valuable, and hopefully it will benefit you tremendously to get something that is complementary to the neighborhood. When it's a win-win that way, it's just better for the city overall. Sometimes when we vote on these items here at City Council, it can look like we gave it, just a few seconds of our time, but chances are, I can't speak for all 7 of us, but I bet we've all been by there, walked by there. I always watch the Planning Commission discussions that occurred before, so I'm hearing, residents may not have showed up tonight, but we do see and understand there's a tremendous amount of background in our council packet. So as we proceed with voting, You know, as Mr. Savedant was saying, to a viewer and someone new to watching us go through this process, I don't want it to look like this is just some quick thing that there's been a lot of thinking and planning that went into this as we take this vote. And again, many, many thanks to the residents for being vocal, for speaking up, and for the developer hearing them and hearing the input. And I think that serves the spirit of our master plan really well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. Additional discussion, Councilmember Abraham?
Thank you, Mayor. This has to be one of the more interesting conditional rezones that we've had in the past few years. On the surface, you look at it and think, well, one, why are there 3 zones for 2 parcels of land? And why on earth would we even consider moving something from EP to anything else? And then you dig into the over 20-plus year history of what was really intended at the time that it got zoned EP. And it wasn't because it had some beautiful natural features that required preservation. The intent was to provide buffer for future development. And thanks to the collaboration with the developer as well as the HOA, that intent is still met in a different way. There could have been, kept EP and had a basin put in there, a dry basin put in there, or it didn't have to. It could have been developed very differently with that EP designation. What we have here is a win-win situation that we're always trying to strive for, because as Councilwoman Hoderick said, development will happen. Property owners have rights. They can develop by right, or they can collaborate with the neighbors. They can collaborate with the Planning Commission to develop something that makes everyone feel good about how something's going to develop versus just accepting what's given to them. And so I am appreciative of all the time and effort that's been taken to make this a really well-rounded proposal. It is extremely unfortunate that a pandemic put a little hitch in the plans, to say the least. But I think the fact that when you look at the history of how this project proceeded and the number of times it went to Planning Commission, and how people that were adamantly against it suddenly became advocates and were supplying their feedback to council and testimony that, no, we support this now. And this is something we will stand by as well. So hats off to all those involved in making this project look like what it is. This, like I said, is a very unusual conditional rezone. Usually if it's a conditional rezone that's in front of council, it's a lot, the conversation is not usually as pleasant as it has been tonight. And so I am appreciative of that.
Thank you, Councilmember Abraham. Any other council discussion? All right. I think both council members, or all council members, have pretty much said everything I wanted to say, so I appreciate it. We'll call for the vote. Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations. Now you can start processing the application, right? Next up is Next up is E2. It's a preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2020-0013, proposed the Meadows of Troy one-family residential cluster, east of John R., north of Square Lake, parcel number 88-20-01-300-016, section 1, currently zoned R1D, one-family residential district, also to be introduced by Community Development Director Brent Savedant.
Thank you again. And by the way, I expect a phone call from Mr. Thompson at about 8:05 tomorrow morning asking me the status of the review, so I look forward to that. Before us this evening is an application for a one-family cluster development. The word cluster, it's actually planning jargon. It's part of the planning nomenclature, and it's a zoning concept. It involves grouping or clustering of homes together within the development so that the remaining open space the remaining land, on the site can be preserved as open space. This is done for a lot of reasons. The most important one is preserving natural features on the site. Basically, the concept is you group, the closer you group together the units, the more area open space you can preserve elsewhere on the site. It is an option. No one is required to go through this. It requires City Council approval at a public hearing following a Planning Commission public hearing. One of the criteria for qualifying as a cluster is preserving a minimum of 20% open space. And density bonuses can be gained three ways. One is through the provision of open space. The more open space you preserve, the more density bonus you get. It can be gleaned through housing diversity and also sustainable development. It's a subjective standard of 10% bonus if sustainable design is proposed. And the density bonuses are based on the parallel plan, which is a plan that shows what can be developed if it's under existing current zoning. So here's a really rudimentary example. I went over this at the last meeting, but I'll do it very briefly again. We have kind of a before and after here. To the left is a theoretical conceptual property located somewhere in the US of A. You notice that it's got significant features. It's got wetland and wooded area. The developer, in the middle, the developer lays out a parallel plan, basically an unimaginative layout showing what could be done if the site were to be maxed out with a maximum number of units under the existing zoning district. In this example, the developer could construct 60 units. And then to the right is an example of a cluster development where 20% of the site has been preserved as open space. They've managed to preserve the wetland feature on site, cluster units, and provided a development with smaller individual yards, but 20% open space preserved for the entire development. This is a method that City Council a number of years ago thought would be a good tool to help to preserve open space in the city. We've had almost 10 of these developed, and they've done a pretty nice job of preserving a minimum of 20% open space. This was based on feedback from residents who were tired of seeing land clear cut. This is a tool, an option available that I think for the most part has done a pretty good job of accomplishing what was intended. So this property that we're talking about this evening is the frontage property here shown in green. The development area is about 12 acres. It's a piece of about approximately an 80-acre piece owned by the Troy School District. They want to split this off and develop a 31-unit detached single-family condominium cluster on the site. The remaining approximately 68 acres will continue to be controlled by the Troy School District. It is not under consideration this evening. We're not making any decisions tonight on the 68 acres. So we're focusing on the 12 acres, which is the most developable part of the site because it's got the least amount of wetlands on the site. The current zoning is R1D, one family residential. It's vacant. It's surrounded by single-family residential on all sides. I would note, obviously, that property to the north, the 68 acres, is also vacant. It's utilized. It's owned by the Troy School District, as I indicated, and it's utilized for nature center type purposes. Oops. A very brief history. Some of you on council will remember that a number of years ago, there was a similar looking project to the left that went before City Council, was actually approved for 23 units with a similar layout for various reasons that we really don't need to go into. That property was not constructed. We're back this evening with a 31 unit proposal with smaller homes. And I'll get to that in a second. The parallel plan shows that they could develop by right with 25 units. They're seeking an additional 6 units, and the way they're achieving those additional 6 units is by providing 30% open space. Would note that there's 2 points of access proposed on Square Lake. The applicant's proposing to construct a 13-space gravel parking lot and a trailhead to the north. And in terms of the housing type, they're proposing 1.5-story units with first floor master, with bathroom, and these will not exceed 1,900 square feet. We talked the last time I was before you about smaller housing type units. These are those, the 1,900 square feet. Clicker's not working very well this evening. Here's what the elevations will look like. Notice the massing of these. These aren't your 3,300, 3,500, 3,800 square foot, 2.5-story homes. These are 1.5-story. So the massing, the height, significantly less than some of the other cluster developments that you've seen around town. The application complies with all zoning requirements, with the exception of the building separation requirements. For units 1 through 5, so the minimum distance between buildings is 15 feet per the cluster provisions. City Council can waive or reduce those. There's regulatory flexibility. So you have the authority to reduce those. And what the applicant seeks is, instead of 15 feet between units 1 and 5, they proposed only 10 feet. Between units 6 and 12, 16 and 20 through 22, and units 23 through 25, they propose 11 feet. And for units 13, 14, 15, and 25 through 31, they propose 12 feet instead of the 15-foot minimum distance. Notice in red, I say here the bay window effect. That distance, if you notice, you can see it in your packet a little bit better, but here there's bay windows on the sides of when buildings are next to each other. One of them has a bay window. These protrude about 20 inches. So that distance of, for example, 10 feet is the distance from the bay window to the unit next door. If you don't consider the bay window, you can add another 20 inches. So it's, instead of 10 feet, it's really 11 feet, 8 inches distance. So it's a little misleading because that bay window, which only protrudes for a minimum distance along that elevation, that's basically increasing the amount of the variance, if you will, by about 20 inches, if that makes sense. Does anyone have any questions on that concept? Okay. They propose to preserve a minimum of 30% open space in common ownership. This includes some regulated wetlands and significant trees. Again, they propose a 13-space parking lot and a trailhead access. The degree and the location of the future trails, again, that's not for discussion this evening. The intent, according to the Troy School District, is to do that later down the road when there's a conservation easement on the property to the north. But again, we're not talking about that this evening. Planning Commission had a public hearing on this item, and on April 27th, they made a recommendation 5-4. 5-4. I like to have a 0 on the right-hand side of that number. But I'm going to try to explain the issues that at least 4 members of the Planning Commission had. And before I go any further with this, I just want to say it's very difficult to try to capture what a board of appointed Planning Commission members are thinking, but just for the purpose of transparency and dialogue, I'll try to summarize what the issues were, and I'm not speaking for them. I'm just trying to shed light on it for the purposes of this application. The first issue was the setback deviations between buildings. We had, I believe, 2 members that opposed the deviation. They felt that the 15 feet was there for a reason, and that they had some issues with the setbacks. The applicant is here this evening. He's got a presentation. He's going to go into some of the reasons why he believes that these deviations will not negatively impact the residences that are abutting this parcel. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but he's got a PowerPoint presentation. I believe that was the no votes of 2 of the members. The second was a resident submitted an email that objected to the development, in part because the resident felt that the project could be better if the use of harsh chemicals was limited. So for herbicides, pesticides, what have you. One of the planning commissioners in the resolution to approve put language in there that had the effect of limiting the use of harsh chemicals. But some of the planning commission members objected to the use of the language, and it kind of became a little clouded. So I believe that there were 2 no votes because 2 planning commission members thought that it was appropriate to add language restricting the use of pesticides and herbicides. So with that in mind, the applicant is here. They proposed a letter that's in your packet proposing to add provisions in the bylaws, basically requiring that healthy lawn care program for watershed protection be utilized. They're open to doing that. So as they move forward, so hopefully I capture kind of a general summary of the 4 no votes. But it was ultimately recommended for approval. So in exchange for 6 more units identified in the parallel plan, the applicant proposes the following. One is preserving 30% overall site plan, open space, which allows for the preservation of natural resources and site amenities. They propose the long-term protection and preservation of natural features and open space, preservation of regulated trees and a regulated wetland, public parking lot and trailhead, and a housing product with first floor master bedroom and bath, which is desired by the community. In terms of recommendation, the Planning Commission finds overall the following. The development better protects the site's natural resources than if the site were not developed as a cluster. The development better protects adjacent properties than if the site were not developed as a cluster. The development is compatible with adjacent properties. It's served by infrastructure. The applicant proposes a public parking lot and trailhead to help to preserve trails and provide for trails. And they provide, again, that housing product with first floor master and bath. So overall, the Planning Department recommends approval of the plan with 3 conditions, and these can be addressed prior to final approval if this goes forward. 1, providing a new wetland assessment or extension from the state of Michigan, Eagle. 2, provide a maintenance agreement for the parking lot. And 3, provide an easement over Turtle Woods Drive to provide public access to the parking lot. And I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Brent. Questions from council? Councilmember Chamberlain-Crenga.
Thank you, Mayor. The reports, I looked at the traffic reports, and they say there will be no noticeable impact on East Square Lake Road in terms of traffic. Does that take into account this parking lot and traffic that may induce?
I don't have it in front of me, but with 13 parking spaces, it's gonna basically have the effect of limiting the number of visitors that are going to be able to park in the parking lot. So based on the numbers that were proposed as part of the development, I'm not a traffic engineer, but 13 parking spaces, 13 is not a lot of cars for a road with the capacity of Square Lake Road.
Other questions from council? Councilmember Erickson Galt.
Thank you, Mayor. Following up on that, there's a lot of developments either in the works or proposed on Square Lake Road, including the one that's going in at DeQuinder and Square Lake. I know there was one at Willow Grove that my understanding that's on hold for now, but it's not dead. It's perhaps going to go ahead. Do the traffic studies take in effect not just what's currently happening, but all of the development that's going on all along the road?
Again, I'm not trying to wear a traffic engineer hat, but the developments that you've correctly identified are relatively limited in scale. Now, for larger developments, and I'm not the person who makes that determination. We have a city engineer and a traffic consultant that look at that. These smaller developments with limited number of uses, even when you combine them for cumulative effect, they really don't have a significant impact on Square Lake Road. But for larger developments, like we've got an application we're processing right now for example, it's a 20-some acre site at the northwest corner of Crooks and Long Lake. That one we're talking about, significant number of units, potentially significant square footage of office. That one would look at, take a more comprehensive, a bigger picture, study. But these smaller issues, even cumulatively combined, really have insignificant impact on Square Lake.
Sorry. One other question is, what is, for the side setback, you said there was 15 on a typical cluster development, and what is the side setback requirement on a non-cluster? Like if somebody was putting in a development by right, what would be the setback?
For R1D, I think it's, I didn't bring my ordinance. It's close. I want to say it's 15 and 5. I should have brought my book. I could tell you. I can go grab it if you want. I don't want to misspeak.
It's at least 15.
It's either combined 10 and 5 or 15 and 5. I could go grab my book if you'd like.
No, that's fine. And then what is the purpose of the side setbacks? What are we trying to do? Is it a safety issue? Is it a peaceful coexistence issue? Why do we have that sort of requirement?
Well, it's both of those things. It's intended to ensure that buildings are appropriately spaced. Now, I know that most members of City Council have visited clusters in the city, and I got to be careful because I don't want to insult certain builders who they build an outstanding product, but for, again, trying to stick handle here. I think when let me start over. I think when the cluster concept was initially conceived, with the density bonuses, we anticipated that because there were some really healthy density bonuses, and we've talked about this at the last meeting, for smaller units, we thought that the market would really be responsive and would develop these homes that are proposed this evening, these smaller homes. The developers would be lined up to build these smaller homes, and that hasn't happened to the degree that we hoped it would. And for some developments that were approved as cluster with larger homes, you need every bit of that 15 feet because the massing and the height are 2.5 stories. That extra massing of the building, the extra height, can create like somewhat of a canyon effect when you visit these clusters. Okay. With these units, the height, they're a story less. With the roof pitch, they don't create that canyon effect as much as the larger homes can. So in this instance, in my opinion, the 15 feet can be reduced as proposed because the massing, the bulk, it's not as impactful. There is the ability for City Council to have that regulatory flexibility and not have to go before, you don't have to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. An applicant can get this regulatory flexibility from City Council at the same time as they get site plan approval. So in this instance, that's what they seek, and this is different than, again, other developments with larger homes. The impact is on the abutting neighbors is significantly less. That was a long-winded answer to your question.
No, I appreciate that. So there's multiple considerations going on and why we want homes spaced a certain distance apart.
Right.
Okay. And then finally, I think you said there that by right it would be 25 units?
Yes.
And what size homes are those 25 units? Is it the 3,000 to 4,000 square foot that? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, so the typical homes that we see being built as of right in Troy is the 25 units. Okay.
Yeah, they basically, if the lots were the minimum permitted under R1D, the footprint would be about 2,550 square feet. That's just the footprint, the first floor. So you basically almost double it and go higher. So you're going to have 25 really big houses. That's what the market's going to deliver.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick follow-up about that?
Sure.
This spacing? It's about, from us, 10 feet's about you to me, right? Which seems close. But to me, and you spoke a little bit about it, how much of the decision-making on that is related to what the neighbors around are looking at versus the people who are choosing to live in these homes? For example, if I chose to live in a home where I was 10 feet from somebody else, isn't a good portion of that my responsibility and up to me? And if I don't like that, I wouldn't build there? I mean, how much of that balancing act is done?
That's well put. I think, and it's a question I want to really defer to the applicant on this, not because I'm afraid to answer it, but because I think he's built these before, and he knows what people who are looking for these types of units are looking for. We've talked about this both publicly and offline, and I'm going to put words in Mr. Lockwood's mouth here, but for someone like myself, my kids are one's graduated university, one's still in university. I don't need a big yard myself. It's just a maintenance pain, and I think for generally speaking, for people that are buying these types of units, the additional space means additional maintenance. That space isn't really going to be utilized as much as if they're young families with kids, et cetera. So there's a little bit of that. They know the marketplace. So for the potential buyers, they really don't care if they do feel strongly about having 15 feet, they're not going to buy. Right. So they're confident they're going to sell the units, and the neighbors who face it. I talked again about balance, right? That balance of property rights. They're closer together, but the massing and the bulk of the units aren't as much. So again, it's that balance where the impact isn't as great as if they were 3,500, 3,800 square foot homes. So balance.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Brooks?
Sure, thank you. So at the public hearing, the preliminary site review on April 13, 2021, in front of planning, the proposal stated that they were anticipating about 43% open space, and now it's 30%. What was the reason for such a reduction in the open space?
Yeah, I was when I was preparing for the meeting, I was scratching my head as well because this application has taken some time to process because of COVID, et cetera. There's minimum of 30% open space that's preserved, going to be preserved in a conservation easement. But when you consider all the open space on the site, it exceeds 40%. Is basically how to look at that.
Okay, so that's okay.
And John Thompson, who spoke earlier, is also the civil engineer on this project, and John can verify how much open space, but it's minimum 30%.
Okay, thank you.
Your slide actually looks like more than 30%.
It does.
In the picture, for what it's worth, I thought that looks like more than 30%.
It does. It also includes the detention basin, so there's some crazy math in there.
As long as it's not fuzzy. Any other questions for Brent from Council or Councilmember Hamilton?
Thank you, Mayor. Am I correct that when I read the traffic study that they did, that they actually estimated that the 31 units from this, because they're 1,900 square feet, because they're single story and would have more senior homeowners, they actually estimated there'll be less traffic produced from the 31 units than would from the 25 unit parallel plan, because it would be younger. It'd be giant McMansions, and it would be younger and family, and they'd be going to school and all that stuff, where seniors are more.
Yeah, I'm going to catch it from our city engineer tomorrow for putting my traffic engineer hat on. I'm not a traffic engineer, but generally speaking, as Pardon me?
I'm teasing. He can hear us. He couldn't hear us, but he's watching on YouTube.
Okay. So as a rule of thumb for trip generation numbers, your traditional home, parents, children, et cetera, there's on average about 10 trips per day. So you get up in the morning, you go to work, you come home, that's 2 trips. And at typical traditional homes, 10 trips a day. For these types of units, closer to 6 trips a day. So you do the math, you're looking at 31 times 6 compared to 25 times 10. So the very rudimentary math, but yeah, it will generate a little bit less traffic with more units.
Right, and the way I view this is really, we're not determining whether a project gets done or not. We're determining, do we want to just have the developer do what they already can do by right, 25 homes, or do we want to do the 31 with all the bonuses that come with that?
Right.
I thought that was really interesting, that more homes could reduce traffic, but it makes sense when you really think about who's going to buy those homes.
And it can also, Mr. Bruner and I were having an email conversation this morning with the smaller footprints, with more units can actually have less coverage, lot coverage, depending how big those 25 homes are.
Assistant City Manager Bruner, would it be possible to, not tonight obviously, but in the future, we either had a presentation a few years ago on how our traffic studies work in this city, or there's a memo existing. Is there something we could maybe have to us submitted as a report or something, just with some basic, this is what we do, this is what we look at? Because we do get asked a lot about the traffic studies as it relates to development projects, and
sure.
I think that if council agrees. Yep. Thank you. Additional questions for Brent? I actually thought of one more that I hesitate to ask, but I'm going to.
Great.
Just because I know the history. I'm assuming, there's a contingency period with this project as there was with the previous project that we approved, and I know that it was ended right as that contingency period ended, or was about to end. Is that similar timing still in effect with this project?
I think that's a question more appropriately asked to the developer who's here this evening.
Okay. Is it time for the developer to come forward?
I believe it is.
We'll call him the applicant. It's nicer sounding.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. First of all, I want to thank you for your time and your consideration tonight. I'm Tim Loughran. I'm the Director of Land Acquisition for Robertson Brothers Homes, 6905 Telegraph Road, Bloomfield, 48301. If I can just go through a quick presentation and then answer questions, I'd appreciate that. Great. If we can put that on. The red one? I think I changed the screen somehow. All right. There we go. Okay, thank you. So again, the project's name's Meadows of Troy. And just a quick project summary. It is 12.42 acres in size. Just about half of that, a little bit more than half of that, is in dedicated open space, perpetually remaining in its natural state. About 2.5 dwelling units per acre. We did, by the way, provide a draft cluster agreement to council for review. The zoning, as Brent had mentioned, it's R1D, one family residential. We're not proposing to rezone. Of course, we're proposing to develop under the cluster housing option, which would allow up to 32 units. We're proposing 31. The plan type is a for-sale detached ranch condominium. Another way to say that is an age-targeted housing, which really is in limited supply in Troy. There's not much out there, so we do see a hole. In fact, we're building in nearby communities, and some of them are Troy residents. So we would hope this would capture a lot of those move-down buyers that no longer have the kids at home. 1,834 square feet. Some of them, they could have a finished basement, which would add a little more than maybe 1,000 square feet. Open space. There was a question on the open space. Yes, it is 42% excluding the pond, and actually 52% including the pond. The 30% would be the requirement, so I think that's what that came from. So just some project highlights. High quality, owner-occupied empty nester homes. Very high quality materials. I'll show you that in a minute. Well-appointed homes. There'll be 31 new taxpayers. Currently, it's a tax-exempt user. Total build-out, as you can see, over taxable value would be $9.3 million, which would be almost $300,000 per year in annual taxes, where again, right now it is a tax-exempt user. As you will see from the site plan, as you saw from what Brent had shown, significant natural open space, and we also will be providing a trailhead and parking area for public use. And really I think it's important to note this site will serve as a catalyst for the dedicated preservation of the remaining 70 acres, which I can show you in a minute there. It also provides a walkable community, providing pedestrian connections to that open space complex. Of course, there'll be tree-lined streets throughout. And again, as I mentioned before, this really is a housing option that is in limited supply in Troy. So we think that they're vastly underserved in this market. And just a little bit about Robertson. In our 75-year history, I think we've been referred to as the condo kings. We built a lot of condominiums, a lot of this type of product. We built all types of product, but I think we're probably in all of southeast eastern Michigan, we've probably built more of these types of communities. So I would say we have a lot of expertise in this type of product. And again, shameless self-promotion, highly respected builder with over 75 years of experience. Specifically in Troy, we've built a lot. I don't list them all here. I mentioned Chatfield Commons. I think that's a very relevant, similar type of project right at the corner of Coolidge and Waddles. And then you probably know us from several recent townhomes. Started in Kilmer Place, I think that was about 2015, 2016, right behind Saitai, and Tim Hortons on Big Beaver. I think that was a very successful project, really kind of a catalyst for that area. We finished up the Bradley Square project on Rochester Road just south of Long Lake, and we just sold out for Long Lake Square, which is basically Livernois Long Lake. So very happy with Troy. Site concept plan, Brent had walked through this a little bit. A couple of notes I would like to speak on. This really is a true use of the concept, the cluster concept. In fact, when we look at your ordinance, it screams for exactly what we're proposing. We're providing much more open space than you would ever get with a standard development. What isn't shown here, and I'll go through the architecture a little bit more, what's not shown here is that these are all single story. I know Brent had mentioned story and a half. These are actually all single story. There is no upper level, if you will. So they all are ranch style homes with 2 bedrooms and a den, all on one floor. So that's not shown here. And the reason I bring that up is, as Brent had mentioned a little bit, you don't get the tunnel effect like you would with a 2-story. If these were 2 stories, we would not propose this. This type of buyer, first of all, is not interested in having a yard. That's not what they're buying. They could buy a duplex somewhere. They do not buy a duplex because they don't want to be directly, they want to have a shared wall. So that's very important to note. This is what these buyers prefer. This is the type of living, and we build a lot of these. So, as a practitioner, what we're telling you is that this is something that we're not concerned about whatsoever with our target market. From a community, greater community, they won't see that. I mean, we have probably more than we need trees along Square Lake as a buffer. But there's no impact to the greater community based on the building separation. And again, our buyers will have no concern. In fact, we're investing well over $10 million in this project. We would not put our money in a project where we think there's any risk of failure. So I want to really stress that the building separation as it's come up in our mind is not an issue for this buyer. And Brent had mentioned a little bit, and I think I provided in your packets. I have handouts if you want. That exhibit, really, it's difficult because a lot of communities are different. They don't. Some communities don't have the measurement from a bay window, especially when it's cantilevered like we do. They have it from wall to wall. So that's kind of maybe reducing or making the impact a little bit more to the building separation than what it actually is. Another thing to point out on the site plan, we did talk about traffic a little bit. I heard that. That is true. When I read that too, But that is something that is we do see in a lot of these types of communities as far as less traffic for this type of buyer compared to a larger, standard home. Infrastructure impact as well. With the other advantage, and this is something that your ordinance does call out, one of the advantages of a cluster development is there's less infrastructure, meaning there's less infrastructure, there's less roads, there's less utilities to maintain. Those are all costs, those are hidden costs, and that's really what the cluster ordinance strives to convey as far as having that efficient, smaller type of development, which is from a maintenance standpoint, long maintenance. There'll be private roads, so of course our HOA will maintain those roads, but there'll be city utilities, so there'll be costs as far as savings, as far as having more of an efficient development rather than having a large development that goes all the way around. I think that's an important fact. This does show the trailhead. It's a gravel trailhead. We would not propose that in a private, age-targeted type of community. That is something that was very important to the school district. So we felt it was obviously important as well because they're our seller. So we're proposing that basically for a connection, pedestrian connection to the greater 70 acres, which would be, as I understand, would be dedicated to the Oakland County and the Six Rivers Conservancy. So that is part of the proposal. We would have a public easement along Turtle Woods Drive, so they could access that, and then that would get you to the trail system. Just one note, Edmonds Drive, that is actually named for Ida Edmonds, who was, as I understand, was a Board of Education. She was on the Board of Education for over 3 decades, so that was important to the school district. Actually, I proposed switching that to where Turtle Woods Drive is. I think she was a proponent, quite a proponent for open space, so that I think that would make a lot of sense for this.
Does Ida know that? Is she aware of that? Sorry to interrupt. We'll get to questions. This is the trail plan. I just wanted to briefly mention this. There are some unimproved trails on the site. We will be providing some connections to them as part of the development, as you can see here with the dashed lines. Next slide here is just really a site context, showing it in a larger impact. You can see all of the open space to the north, and I have another site, another plan that I think will demonstrate that even more. So getting into the design, again, they're all on one floor, so there's single-story ranches. Those windows really are more for decoration, so it's not just a flat roof that you're seeing over the garages. We talked about the, let me see if this works here. So we talked about the separation between the bay window and the other home. What's really important that I want to point out is, typically when you have a condition with single family to single family, there's windows on both sides. We're very conscious about that. There is no window on this side of the house, so you don't have people looking in from one house to another. So, this is all very thought out, well thought out, very planned. Again, there's quite literally zero impact from one house to the other because of this condition. So the building separation in our estimation is not an issue. And again, they would not be using this side setback. There's no playgrounds that they can have on their lots, right? These are condominiums or detached condominiums, so they do not own this property. So what's important to note is there will be a homeowners association that's established that would maintain all of this landscaping here. They'd also maintain roofs and things like that. So these are true condominiums. It would be like a duplex or a fourplex. We're just detaching them. So again, this is far superior to a duplex or a quad, if you will, quadplex for this type of buyer. And this, again, shows the high-quality materials. We're talking about hardy board. We're talking about stone, brick. We are building this in an adjacent community. Don't necessarily want to mention another community, but that kind of shows what, hopefully, maybe you've seen it, gone to our website. It's been very well received. The public has really liked this product a lot. So we know that this will be successful in Troy. Another page that shows the architecture. Again, a lot of brick.
the cost of all these materials is obviously very expensive, but they're all kind of the same, to be honest. So what we like to do is mix that up. So you can see on the top right, you've got stone brick and hardy board, vertical board and batten, all on one elevation. Then you have also your traditional brick as well, which is very popular as well. So very well pointed, very open floor plan, which is what obviously buyers want to see today. So it feels great, it lives great, and this is what your existing residents want to move into as they move down. So just quickly, I want to talk about the one family cluster option. I want to run through the points because, again, we looked at your ordinances and we feel that this project that we've created really meets the intent of your cluster ordinance. Encourage the use of property in accordance with its natural character. Of course, that's what we're proposing to do. Ensure the permanent preservation of open space and other natural features. That is the intent of this development. Provide recreation facilities and open space within a reasonable distance. It's right there. There's plenty of open space. There's plenty of walking paths, which I think will be a very important part of this community. Allow innovation and greater flexibility in the design of residential developments. That's what we're asking from you to provide. We're meeting all requirements but for the building separation, as Brent had talked about. In order to provide so much open space, those are the things that are necessary to do. I just want to go back real quick. I mean, we literally could get the same number of units and meet all of your building separation requirements. What that would mean is the gravel trailhead would disappear. Means this wetland, we'd have to, we could do offsite mitigation through Eagle. We do not want to do that. We feel this is, having this much open space, it is an important, ecological area as well to the north of this. So we feel by clustering it, by keeping all this open space, that we're really providing something that's special. So we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to have to spread out into some of these open space areas. We wanted to basically build in the upland area, which is what we're proposing. So I believe that really speaks to number 4, allow innovation and greater flexibility in the design of residential development, so we can achieve that. Facilitate construction and maintenance of streets in an efficient manner. That's what I had talked about before. Ensure compatibility of design and use between neighboring property. Again, it's single family basically to single family. We are single story, so we're lower impact than the neighbors as well. Encourage a less sprawling form of development. Of course, by clustering, you're reducing the amount of sprawl. And design innovation to provide flexibility for land development, which is exactly what we're looking to proceed. I think this kind of lays out a lot. On the left is, both of these actually show, these are two separate plans. Both of these really show the overall 80 acres that the Troy School District owns. Again, they are selling essentially the 12 acres up front. And this is not part of the discussion tonight, as Brent had mentioned. But their plan is to dedicate this as preserved area. The way to do that is to have us on our dime put in this gravel trailhead and obviously start to act as a catalyst financially for the cost to do that future conservancy. What this also shows out, so it shows all of the open space that is to remain because of this project. What it also shows is the parallel plan, which I don't think Brent had shown. I personally think if we were just to bend the limits of this, and I'm sure the school district would see value in that, you could add 6 more lots here. We're not proposing that. We're not proposing to build this. This is an R1D parallel plan conforming plan. As you can see, this is a lot more road, takes out a lot more open space. We're proposing to build this, and you can see this provides so much more open space and usable open space in addition to that. The other thing, I don't really want to get into detail on this because I don't want it to sound like a threat whatsoever. But as a developer, we look at upland like this. There's not a lot of upland here. We're not proposing anything. The school district certainly is not proposing anything, but there is a lot of upland, and I think I've seen a plan with 100 homes. I appreciate that the school district has really held firm through all of this in order to preserve all of this area, and I think that that's an important fact that hopefully is not lost. And I just want to speak quickly. Brent had mentioned it a little bit about the Planning Commission. Hopefully some of you had seen that on Zoom. And I think overall there was broad support for what we were proposing. There was discussion on an initial motion that included basically a provision for using fertilization that doesn't use chemicals and that sort of thing. We spoke up. We were completely willing to have a condition for that. As it kind of turned out, it sounded like some of them weren't comfortable having that. So it passed without having any type of say fertilizer requirement or specified fertilizer requirement, but I think we lost a couple planning commissioners because of that. We are proposing to do that. We're self-stipulating. I added this into your packets. Hopefully you read through that, but we are proposing to meet the Michigan Grain Industry Association's step-by-step process. We'd also propose to add a stipulation on above that, which would be not having any fertilization within 20 feet of natural open space area. It's important to us too. We know this is an important location. We're 100% for it. So we would propose adding that condition as you see there. There are a number of firms that kind of specialize in this. We've researched it. We would add this to our master deed, and that would be in there perpetually. So that's something we would, in addition to what the Planning Commission had proposed, is that we would be fine having that additional condition. So I've spoken enough. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have of me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and willingness to take questions now. Are there any questions from council for our applicant? Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few. I'll throw some out there and see what you can do. So when it comes to tree removal in the open space preserve section, are you really just preserving most of the trees there but only removing it for the retention pond? Is that the intention there? Or are you going to have to remove more than just the retention pond?
No, our proposal is just to as little as possible, obviously for the detention pond and on the trailhead. I don't know how many are there specifically where the trailhead is, but we are not proposing to clear cut. That leaving those trees where they're at, I think, is the benefit to our community.
Okay, and that's good. And I know you're going to plant 134 more trees on the kind of, you can see it there at the bottom in the front area and call it kind of all around, so that's good. I asked this to the last project too. What is your timeline if this is approved tonight? When do you see breaking ground? When do you see this project starting?
We would have hoped to already have started, obviously. COVID didn't allow that. So we're getting close to missing this development cycle. We would hope if we could get approval tonight, I would kick John off tomorrow. Actually, he already knows this, on final engineering with the hope that we could start development this year. I don't know if we pave or not, but we would, we've been at this a long time. I know the school district wants us to move forward, and so do we, so as fast as possible.
Okay. And then my third question is, so if we were to amend tonight's resolution to add your page on the chemical usage, you'd be fine with that?
Yes.
And maybe I'll ask the city attorney if that's okay if I propose that as an amendment, or when we propose this, just add it to the initial resolution, but that should be okay?
City Attorney Bloom?
Yes, so in addition to adding that condition, another condition that I'm going to recommend that you add is that there be also an acceptable open space agreement, which is required by our ordinance as well. So those are two items that if you want them to be binding, then they should be in your resolution.
We're fine with both of those.
Thank you.
Sorry, 1 second. Additional questions from council? I had asked my last question to Brent when he was up here, and he punted to you, and you're eager to get started on this. My question about contingency periods and that process, is there anything that you would foresee well, first of all, is there an opportunity for you to back out of this at a certain point?
Without approvals, yeah, we're contingent on approvals, which would be essentially, these final approvals. They have worked. The school district has worked. Obviously, they've known the challenges we've had. The city's had, obviously, with what's happened. So they've granted us extensions. But yes, basically we're contingent on final approvals.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Let's open the public hearing. There's nobody signed up. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on E2? City Clerk Dixon, anybody emails, voicemails, or Zoom?
There are no attendees on Zoom right now. We had no voicemails. We have 3 emails for this item.
Okay.
The first comment is from Chuck Shepard. I am writing in support of the Meadows of Troy project before you this evening. The type of housing being offered in this project is exactly what residents have been asking for. On top of that, it does so in a way that helps preserve green space, another top community priority. The choice before you tonight isn't between development and green space, it's between 25 McMansions or 31 homes with first floor bedrooms and 44% land preservation. Please vote to give the community what it's been asking for. Next comment is from Mary Bogish. In 1998, an environmental survey completed over 3 seasons by ASTI, Applied Science and Technology, Inc., resulted in the discovery of a globally significant Lake Plain prairie, wetlands, and a woodlot with very large old trees, a variety of habitats providing homes for wildlife, including some threatened species. The plant species present rated high on the Floristic Quality Index. In 2001, the Troy School Board studied, discussed, and passed a resolution to protect the TSD-owned parcel due to the unique natural features, high floristic quality on the Floristic Quality Index, ecological significance, and educational opportunities for Troy students and for residents. Troy High School science teachers led outdoor classes utilizing the parcel and obtained grants for education signage and protective fencing. University of Michigan graduate students wrote papers on how to best manage the unique habitats and protect the hydrology for long-term preservation. Young Troy residents, such as Eagle Scouts, have built signage, trail markers, birdhouses, and one even built a long, sturdy boardwalk over a wetland crossing in dedication to his late grandfather. All this was done with the permission of the Troy School District and with the belief that the Troy School District Nature Preserve would be just that, preserved for the benefit of wildlife, Troy residents, and future generations. Troy residents regularly walk the system of trails and enjoy the peace and tranquility. The 2001 Troy School Board wanted it rezoned EP for environmental protection, but one 2001 school board member proposed to keep it zoned residential to, quote, keep it open for possible future opportunities, end quote. That has ultimately resulted in this proposed development, which will forever alter the landscape and change the natural hydrology and seasonal fluctuating water table, which support the prairie plants, unique features, and ecological integrity of the land. Since 1980, I have observed the wildlife habitat referred to as Section 1 and more recently, quote, Turtle Woods, unquote, undergo tremendous environmental changes due to the impacts of a golf course development to the north and subdivision developments bordering on the east and west. The current Troy School Board has reversed the actions of a previous school board in 2001 who passed a resolution to preserve this large parcel and prevent fragmentation. Other TSD-owned properties were deemed useless and inaccessible to the public because they were landlocked and subsequently were sold and developed. This proposed Meadows of Troy development on the south border of the property will result in this parcel becoming landlocked. 4 planning commissioners recently voted against this development for reasons including pesticides and herbicides leaching into the wetlands and creek. Planning Commission Chair Tom Krent is correct in saying that the city won't be able to forbid new homeowners from using pesticides and herbicides on their lawns, all of which will drain downstream into the natural wetlands, creek, groundwater, and into the wetland adjacent to Evanswood Church, a wetland that is habitat for the highest density of frog and toad species within city limits. What is to become of the remainder of the TSD-owned property to the north if it is not rezoned EP? It is still zoned residential, and the TSD has voiced no specific plans to guarantee protection. Will you, the City Council, step up and zone it EP for environmental protection? I have a wetlands survey map that shows the wetlands on this property have been in existence for decades. Now some are proposed to be paved over with a development and streets named after what will be destroyed: meadows, ponds, turtles, woods. It's time for you to consider the gravity of your decision and the impact it will have on the environment and future generations. The third comment is from Tina Catron. We received the notice about the public hearing that is to be held at tonight's TCC meeting. I just want to send my comments regarding Section 1. I still firmly believe that the city can afford to leave the entire parcel to the capable hands of Six Rivers Land Conservancy. We are in one of the wealthiest cities and school districts in the state. By building even more cookie-cutter houses by the developer Robertson, we are robbing our community a beautiful upland forest to welcome students and educators to one of the rarest ecosystem combinations in our state. Instead, they will be greeted by out-of-place cookie-cutter homes. The preschool is already built and in operation. Take the $1.5 million hit and allow the parcel to stay intact for the benefit of our residents, scouts, students, and educators.
Thank you, City Clerk Dixon. Thank you to the three of you who have submitted your public comment. Again, anybody else in the audience here like to speak on this for the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Someone like to move the resolution to get it on the table for discussion? Councilmember Hamilton.
Try this with the way we discussed. Okay. I would like to move E2, preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2020-0013, propose the Meadows of Troy, one family residential cluster east of John R., north of Square Lake, parcel number 88-20-01-300-016, section 1, currently zoned R1D, as printed in the agenda packet, with the addition of pages 136 to 138 of the overall agenda packet here, which mentions adding the requirements for pesticides, healthy lawn care program for watershed protection, in addition to requiring an open space preservation agreement.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hamilton and supported by Councilmember Hoderick that we approve E2 preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2020-0013, proposed the Meadows of Troy, one family residential cluster east of John R., north of Square Lake, parcel number 88-20-01-300-016, section 1, currently zoned R1D, one family residential district, as printed in the agenda packet and amended just now into the record relating to the healthy lawn letter and the open space agreement requirements as spoken. Discussion. I actually have a question first for City Attorney Bloom. Those two amendments, first of all, they're sufficient for the purposes we need?
Yes, actually, Clerk Dixon is on top of it, and I'm sure that she has captured all of it, as has Councilmember Hamilton.
Okay. My second question to that, is there, other than this open space agreement, is there any potential unintended consequences or potential risks by including the healthy lawn agreement as part of that, as amended? I mean, are there issues with doing something like that we need to worry about?
It's something that is offered by the applicant, and so because he's offering that, and because the applicant is offering that condition, again, I don't know the healthy lawn provisions, so I don't know all of what it encompasses, but certainly it does provide a greater amount of protection than not having anything.
Okay, thank you. Discussion from council? Councilmember Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. About 5 years ago, when I first started out on council, there was a lot of consternation, much as there is now, about development in the city, particularly with clear cutting of property that had been, purchased for development. It was something that was near and dear to my heart, close to where I live. 3 adjacent properties had been clear cut. Very old growth trees that had been there for decades, centuries maybe, were torn down to put up what some would call McMansions. And so the dialogue that was going around in the city at that time certainly resonated with me. There are two things that came up at council in the 2016 timeframe to address those concerns that residents were having. One was the cluster housing option that we heard about today, and the second was the tree preservation ordinance that mitigated the impact of landmark trees coming down. And the combination of these two ordinance changes, or these two options, have really become powerful in terms of preserving green space, which we know residents continue to value, and we hear it every day, and we see it with recent surveys taken. The matter before us is the 12-acre parcel. And I want to be very careful. It's not the full 80. It is the 12-acre parcel that the school district has come into an arrangement to sell to Robertson Homes. So it is the 12 acres that we're talking about it. And the matter before us isn't develop or not development, because the owner has rights, by rights, to develop the property, and we saw the 25-unit home that could be developed without permission from anyone. It's their natural property rights. It's that option, or the option presented with the cluster option, where you do have the preservation of green space on the 12 acres with the trailhead leading into the 68 remaining acres that remains under the Troy School District's control. So I want to be very clear that we're only talking about the 12 acres because this is a very loaded topic. I want to comment a little bit on the cluster option. We've seen about 10 of these come to council over the past 5 years with varying degrees of execution. And in my time, I think this project probably hits closest to both the spirit and the intent of what the cluster option was intending. Additional density bonuses with smaller houses on smaller parcels versus maybe the same size house on a smaller parcel. And at the same time, preserving very unique green space and natural properties, more so than having open space where you could put in a playground. This is truly preserving what is already there while allowing the property owner to develop as they are allowed to do, and try to come to that win-win solution. Again, we can't ask the property owner not to develop. It is their right. So now it's just a matter of what option works best for the city. And I think that this option is the best option at this point. I want to make a comment on Edmonds Street. Ida Edmonds was on the school board for about 30 years and greatly shaped the school district. And as a product of the Troy School District, I'm absolutely touched that you would name a street after her. I think if you were to ask Ida, she would say, name it after Don, her late husband, who was the biggest proponent of tree preservation, would avidly look over the topography of every development and see what trees there were, and was a huge proponent of the cluster option. And so I was already tending to support this project anyway, but I wanted to thank the developer for that consideration of the Edmonds. They've been huge champions of the city and have really are part of the reasons why Troy has developed into the city that it has today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Abraham. Additional discussion from Councilmember Hoderick?
Thank you, Mayor. I watched this come before the Planning Commission, kind of held my breath, wondering what would be presented. And as it unfolded and I watched the discussion, knowing, as Councilmember Abraham said, what we're looking at is the 12 acres and it is the right to develop it. What would that development look like? Who's involved? What are they bringing? As a council member who's taken numerous calls over the years about why isn't there housing stock, a ranch-style housing stock for aging residents here to consider ranch-style, I was, number one, thrilled to see that type of housing stock being brought forward. Secondly, I am familiar with the quality of the work that you felt a little self-boasting maybe, and it's hard to set, when I can tell there's some humility there in the midst of it. But I am familiar with your work here, in particular with a project that's not far from where I live, and how well received it is. On top of it, to see the spirit of the Custer Ordinance and the tree preservation that we were seeking to try to serve the residents' outcry, so much so with both of those elements, revealed back then, this was what I thought that would look like, and the type of property that I thought this would benefit from the Custer Ordinance. For residents who are watching, who are saying, well, you should be able to do more. This was a lot of work to develop this Custer Ordinance and to finesse it over time. Our tree preservation, I watched Lansing in a lame duck session nearly eradicate that. Our capability to own that and manage that in our city was speaking up on social media, pleading with our rep to make sure that he, at the time, understood that is not what our residents would want, and to beg for local control. What I've seen happen here is that the best we can do in terms of local control brought to this project idea to deliver a housing stock that people do want here. Mr. Savidan, I don't know if you still have people coming to the counter. I know over the past 16 months, probably not, but and I know that you've been trying to say to developers, this is something that people want. So this, if you're not following this over a number of years and getting the calls from residents and understanding what people say, you might look at this and go, really? And I'm saying, yeah, really. This is the collaboration and our ordinance and our master plan working for this 12-acre site where something is going to go there. There is going to be something there. And I was pleased to see this very thoughtful, I can tell Mr. Savidan's been listening to us, our residents. I can tell the developer was listening and watching what people have been dialoguing about. And it may not be really evident to residents watching maybe for the first time, but there's a lot comprehended here that we've been working so hard to do, and it's not easy to do. I really appreciate the efforts that were put forward in this. I do see it. I appreciate you. I know you talk to people that come with what our community is desiring, and we can only tell them what they're desiring, and then it's developers that bring it. I personally feel that this is such a great good faith effort to do the right thing for the right reasons on this property. And that's why it will have my support. I rewatched the Planning Commission to try to second guess myself. I always try to do both decisions. If I voted no, what could I articulate legally for that no? I can't, because this is exactly what we've been desiring for some time. And I know not everybody will be happy with a yes vote on this. Feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to separately. We can't block development. We can't keep private property owners from doing what they have a right to do. The best we can do is work to get the best outcomes there as possible. And that's what I see here with this project. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. Additional discussion? Councilmember Hamilton?
It's always hard to follow up council members Hoderick and Abraham, but as a nerdy engineer who's not great at public speaking, but I'll do my best. And I pretty much support everything both of you have said. I'll just add that, again, we're talking about what they can do by right: 25 McMansions versus 31 under 1900 single-story homes that seniors can relocate when they retire, which is something we've heard for years is in Hyatt that our residents really want. What I really like is that, by my calculation, I went through the tree preservation document and everything. I think we're preserving around 37% of the trees that are on that piece of land, which wouldn't happen if the parallel plan were to happen. And then on top of that, they're planting another 134 trees. So the overall trees we're preserving almost half the amount of trees that were there before, which is pretty remarkable to me. The tree protection ordinance was put in place before I joined council, but it shows how right that was for our community. And really, I don't have much else to add. What was said before, I will be supporting this because I think it's the better of the two options before us. It's the better option. I look forward to seeing what progresses with the school district with the rest of their property, but that has no bearing on this decision. As a resident who lives nearby, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I walked the property last night. I got the bug bites to prove it. But to preserve as much of that as possible, to me, is really important, and that's what this does. If we were to vote no, we would be preserving less of it, and we'd be creating more traffic, as the traffic study showed. So to me, the benefits far outweigh the having extra units. So I'll be in support.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Additional discussion? I'll go quickly. To me, this is exactly what our cluster ordinance is for when we passed it in 2016. It not only meets the black letter of the law, but actually the intent behind it as well. So it is a win-win. And we've waited through a lot of projects hoping to see this kind of development be done. And it's exciting to see it actually come, and to have somebody who's upset that they can't get started faster and is at risk of missing a building season. And it is tough for all of us to see trees get cut down and development to happen. We recognize that. We sympathize with the residents who are watching that happen, and also all of us, we don't like it either. I don't think any of us up here like to watch that kind of thing happen to the wooded areas in our city. But this cluster ordinance and this proposal are, I think, about as best of as good as we could do in this situation, and that makes me very proud to be able to vote in favor of something like this. I voted to approve the previous proposed project. So I feel, and I think this one is far superior, so I feel silly voting anything other than for absolute approval. And I hear the public comment that we received, and I know there was some more at Planning Commission. I've seen some in the packet, and I think there are good points made in those emails and in the previous communications. Some of which we can address, and we've tried by making some amendments tonight as far as the fertilizer or the pesticide issue. some of them we have no control over, recognizing that we don't own the property, and we have a zoning statute that allows for development either by right or with the cluster. And this is the much better alternative to anything that could be developed there by right. I think everybody else has pretty much covered what needs to be said. And I get just, again, for me, the biggest thing is this is what our cluster ordinance is for. And it's a really good example of what can be done to provide the type of housing stock that people have been begging us to wave a wand and magically make approved, which we can't do. So to have somebody come to us and say, not only is is a ranch an option, but it's all going to be ranches, I mean, that's like heaven, frankly. So my full support is coming as soon as we vote. So I'll call for the vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes. Motion carries. All right. There's still a little light out in the sky. If you could start building, that'd be great.
Can we take a break?
Yeah, I'm going to, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back in recess. Mic's not on. All right, back on the record. Next up is public comment. There's nobody signed up here in chambers. Is there any public comment submitted, City Clerk Dixon?
There were no public comments submitted, and there are no people logged into Zoom.
Very good. So we will, no need for council and administration response. There are no postponed items this evening. We move on to regular business. There are no, I1 is board and committee appointments. There are no mayoral appointments this evening, no council appointments either. I2 is board and committee nominations. There are no mayoral nominations this evening, and there are no council nominations either. I3, there's no closed session requested, so we'll move on to I4, confirmation of appointment of Renee Hazen to City Treasurer, and that'll be introduced by Assistant City Manager Bob Bruner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel compelled to mention that City Manager Miller is on a well-deserved vacation with his family, and he'll be back in the hot seat at the next council meetings. But in the meantime, brief history lesson. Back in the 50s, when the city was founded, the people saw fit to include 6 administrative officers in the charter. Now, they can create more administrative offices by ordinance, but the 6 most important positions in the city at that time were the city manager, the attorney, the clerk, treasurer, assessor, police chief, and fire chief. And that may be 7. It's getting late. Maybe I can't count. Point is that tonight you're being asked to approve the appointment of a city treasurer, which is frankly something we often take for granted. Tonight we spend a lot of time talking about land use planning and development, but certainly the person who collects the revenues, not just for the city, but for all the taxing jurisdictions, was very important to the founders of the city back in the 1950s. And also, this will be your 3rd approval of an administrative officer in recent past. We've appointed new fire chief, which was an internal promotion, and new assessor, who's somebody joining us from outside. And tonight, another internal promotion. Renee was most recently the deputy, but also worked in finance here in the city of Troy and elsewhere earlier in her career. So thank you, Renee, for wading through the public hearings tonight, and invite you to say hello to the city council before they consider approving your appointment.
It'll be an intense grilling of questioning. Welcome, Renee. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited for this opportunity. I have enjoyed working for the city of Troy. It'll be 9 years in August. I have over 20 years working for municipalities. I've worked for the city of Wayne for 12 years. I did a short stint in the city of Auburn Hills and then came here 9 years ago.
Very good.
Transferred to the treasurer's office 2.5 years ago, and I have thoroughly enjoyed serving the residents of Troy and the entire community. It's been awesome, really.
Wonderful. Well, I will move I4, confirmation of appointment of Renee Hazen to city treasurer, as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
It's moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Abraham, that we approve I4, confirmation of appointment of Renee Hazen to city treasurer. Any discussion? Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga.
I just want to make a comment that I think it says a lot for the city that it promotes from within. I know not all organizations do that, so I'm delighted to I'm delighted by this news, and it says a lot for the city. It's a great place to work for.
Yes, it is.
Well put. Any other discussion, Councilmember Hamilton?
I just wanted to ask, how long did Ms. Kasprick, the previous city treasurer, work for the city of Troy? Do we have?
I don't have that information handy.
I think it was 17 years.
Well, just wanted to thank her for her years of service, and good luck in her retirement.
Very good. Any other discussion? All right, the vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson-Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations, Renee.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You're welcome to stay and watch the rest, or you can go. Just get in your purse. Have a good night. That concludes regular business this evening. Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda this evening? Councilmember Abraham?
I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda as printed.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Abraham, supported by Councilmember Hamilton, that we approve all items on the consent agenda as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga?
Yes.
Councilmember Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brooks?
Yes.
Motion carries. If you're here on a consent item, all have been approved this evening. Next up is memorandums and future council agenda items. There are nothing for K1, but K2, there's a memorandum, Chapter 107, Troy Traffic and Motor Vehicle Ordinance. Please look at that. Council members and public. City Attorney Bloom, you have anything to say?
Again, if you do have any questions about that, I'm happy to field those questions, and absent significant need for change, then it will be brought back for an action item at the next City Council meeting.
Thank you, City Attorney Bloom. No council referrals this evening, so we move on to reports. Anybody have any comments on the reports as submitted? Councilmember Hamilton.
I just wanted to ask city staff about the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds report. Do we have, I know we're kind of waiting for a final rule to come from the U.S. Treasury, but do we kind of have a timeline for when we may have a special meeting to discuss how we'll spend the $8 million we're being allocated? I know this report stated that we already received our $4 million. However, we have to go through a lot of, all the requirements in order to know how to spend it. So do we have any timeline for when we may meet to discuss that or be presented options for what we can do, or are we just kind of waiting?
Well, we're kind of waiting until the public comment period ends in July, and then kind of gauge whether or not we think there's going to be substantial changes. Earlier today, I emailed you all a save the date for a special joint meeting with Planning Commission in July, and we've also announced a new event that needs a title in November, but I'll call it Strategic Planning Meeting. So we're looking at the schedule and trying to figure out where that will fit in. So it's on our minds and something that we're looking at, but we don't have a specific date that we want to propose yet, which was really part of the reason for the report, to just kind of give the council a quick update. Hey, here's where we're at, and stay tuned.
Thank you. Any other comments on the reports this evening? Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga.
I have a question on the same report as well, just to follow up with Member Hamilton's comment. It states that of the different options, I know we're still waiting for a final guidance, but of the 4 different options outlined at this point, it states in the report that we will likely focus on revenue loss, using those funds for that. And just wanted to get more insights about kind of why that particular option.
Oh, sure. It's easily because that will give the city the most flexibility on how to spend the funds. And so that's really just kind of the easiest option for us to pursue. And that's why we're kind of focused on that right now. But that's certainly something that we'll want to discuss more thoroughly once we're ready.
Thank you. Additional comments on reports? All right. Council comments are next. I just want to start with one. I usually don't start with council comments, but I'm going to take this one. So Saturday was the Nature Center's Run for Nature 5K, and there was a shorter run walk for young ones as well. Yeah, we'll get there. But what I really want to call out is I'm no longer the fastest person on Troy City Council. It was a title I've held for 5.5 years. Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga was very fast in her 5K on Saturday morning, and I just want to congratulate her. She was the first place for all of the women who ran, and I think that she was 8th overall. and I just want to say congratulations. That was impressive, and I've been telling people while I was up on the stage before the event, warming up the crowd, I guess, talking to people, I look out and I see Rebecca doing like sprints and running and training, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get creamed. So I did, although I beat Hamilton by almost 5 minutes. So I just want to say that I do take some credit there. But congratulations, Rebecca. That was very impressive, and it was a cool thing to have you to do so well. And also to the Nature Center, they, I think it was our biggest quasi-city event since the pandemic, and a lot of people were out there. It was outside, which made it a little easier. And they did a really nice job of taking precautions where they felt necessary, but also adapting their run to what had been not as, they used to just do 3 laps of the same kind of course the previous couple times they've done it. They changed it up a little bit this year and added some interest, although Rebecca did say it was harder because you had both trail and concrete, which is, when you're a professional runner like she is, that's a very complex issue. But the Nature Center did a great job. It's also their 10-year anniversary of becoming a nature society. They celebrate that next month. So congratulations to the Nature Center for doing a good event. I did mention to Assistant City Manager Bruner that I know some of us want to talk about the Frightful 5K coming back to our city, and he surprised me by saying they had already scheduled a meeting to discuss it. So no promises on anything, but looking forward to hearing more about that in the coming, whenever that is. So congratulations, Rebecca. You too, David. Actually, one last thing on the run. Councilmember Hamilton, I actually think he wins the most dedicated award because he came late, misunderstanding the staggered start times, and everyone else had already run, so the race was effectively over. But he came and he ran the race by himself on the course and got his official time, and I actually think that's much harder than running it with a group of people because you don't have the same adrenaline and push to run. So I'll cut off a minute of your time for that.
I'll use that as an excuse.
Sorry. All right. Additional council comments. Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig.
Okay, so I'll get my chance to speak. So technically, I don't think I've really raced for close to 2 decades, like raced with people. I did the turkey trot in November, but that was by myself. So I thank council, I thank both of you, Mayor, Councilmember Hamilton, for helping me get back into racing. And I'm committed to just Troy. After that race, I had some residents say, you need to start, you need to start branching out. You need to start doing races. Like, no, just Troy and just charities. So I want to support our local community. And with that, I really appreciate the Troy Nature Society. It's a lot of work to put on a race. I've actually also put on charity races before, and it's an immense amount of volunteers and activities. So to Dave Lambert, their board, all of the youth from the schools who are there helping out, it was just beautiful to see people coming together to just have a really good time together, truly. And it was just so fun running with you all, indeed. On a more kind of serious note, just want to remind folks, this is from Troy Times, the survey for the Troy Master Plan, just thinking of these very important planning matters. This is a chance to really let us know what's on your mind, and you have until this Friday to really share your thoughts and your opinions with us. If you haven't seen it through social media with the city, you can find the links. Or, of course, if you did say this from Troy Times, you're able to use the QR code. Or if you just go to troymi.gov, on the home page in the rotator, you will see it front and center. And you just click it, and it takes you literally straight to the survey. So super easy. I also have a resident, she's 93. She has seen Troy develop literally from the ground up. And she was so insistent she wanted to take this survey, and she doesn't have a smartphone, doesn't really use a computer. So Brett was so kind. I was able to email and able to get an electronic version that I printed out and hand delivered to her, and she was able to mail. So even if you don't have a computer, there's just contact the city. I'm sure you wouldn't mind, as you were helpful to me, to just being able to get a copy and take it. But we really appreciate your input. And if neighborhood notes, that is a question, and you pick 3 of them, and if that's confusing, also don't hesitate to reach out. There's an email, masterplan@troymi.gov, if you'd like some explanation around what all of that is. So I encourage everyone to take that survey. It closes Friday.
Thank you. And there are hard copies of that survey, I think, at the community center as well.
Oh, wonderful.
There are some there. there were, so I'm assuming there still are. Nobody's here to answer my question, but I'm assuming they're still there. All right. Additional council comments? Councilmember Hamilton.
I've seen most of the council members many times in the last week because now that we're all vaccinated, we're finally able to start getting back to reality, and it's great to see that. We had the groundbreaking for the Town Center Park last week, and Mayor Baker gave a great speech, and it was really exciting to see that. It's a new gathering space we're building in Troy with the goal of having it done in early September to have it ready for Troy Days this year, which we are bringing Troy Days back this year after it had its pandemic hiatus like everything else. And so that was really exciting to see, and that should be done in 2.5 months. And I know we're gonna, earlier we passed a resolution to honor Pastor Bob Cornwall, and we're gonna bring him here at the next meeting, but 6 of 7 council members attended his retirement yesterday, and Councilmember Hodder couldn't make it because
I phoned it in.
Yeah, but she did call him. But Pastor Bob has done so much for this community, for City Council, for our police department, for our veterans, and I just thank him for his service to the city. Congratulations to him on his retirement, and I know he's still going to continue to serve the city and live here, but he's been an amazing asset to our community.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Additional council comments? No? I have one more. Tomorrow evening, the Troy Public Library is doing a virtual Meet the Author event with Karen Tumulty, who's a Washington Post opinion writer, also was with Time Magazine before that, but she wrote a book called The Triumph of Nancy Reagan, and I'm going to be hosting that event with her tomorrow. It's a Zoom event, virtual event. You can still register at the Troy Public Library website, and it should be interesting. Karen and I will talk about the book. I worked for President and Mrs. Reagan as well, so I have some bias and some insight that I'd love to share with her and talk to her about. But she's a really interesting, a lot of things, but really good writer, and this is a very well-researched book, and it's not just for, let me just say this, it's not just for Republicans. Let me just put it that way. People might think that because it's about Nancy Reagan, but it's a very balanced look and very, I think, insightful for people across all political spectrums. So that's tomorrow evening, starts at 7 o'clock. Register at the library website. Ellen.
Just to follow up on that, while they were running, I was finishing that book sitting in an Adirondack chair. And it is a really wonderful historical read, written like a journalistic feature news writer would write. And for me, it was fascinating because her lifespan was my mother's lifespan. And my first interests in watching of politics and how the government works was just ahead of the Ronald Reagan years. And so reading this book is just, it's a great historical perspective, no matter what your political persuasion is. I also follow this author on Twitter, and she's funny, so I'm looking forward to the discussion. And just the fact that the library has these meet the authors, what a wonderful opportunity to learn and hear, and just so many different programs like that in the city that to take advantage of, and I'm looking forward to doing that. And I like reading better than running. I'll let Rebecca run. You do the running for me. No, it's going to be an interesting discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. David, do you have something too?
Yeah, I almost forgot. You guys talking about the library? The library's open now,
yeah.
Which is exciting. Again, like we're finally recovering from the pandemic with people getting vaccinated, and we also announced that we'll be opening 7-day library come the week of July 12th. We'll be doing a ribbon cutting or dedication that week, and it's exciting. It's something a lot of us here in council and you, Mayor, have fought for many years, for over, I don't know, what's it been, 12 years, but it's exciting that we finally have the level of funding that our library deserves, and we're finally going to be able to open it 7 days this July.
Very good. Any other council comments? All right. No closed session this evening, so we are adjourned. Oh, I better give these to you from the Garden Club. I took them from her.
Oh, thank you. I want to